Gentlemen, Matthews, if you will.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
it's confusing.
It is a pleasure to speak with you. Honestly, it truly is. The film's incredible. Um, Matthew, you are amazing in it, and it
Thanks,
is
sir.
beautifully brought together.
Thank you so much.
Well, Matthew Brown, let's start with you. What is it that drew you to this story? What was it about the play that made you want to bring it to the screen?
I think it was the themes of it and just the timeliness that I recognized in it. I mean, I started this about 6 years ago, and back then it was already very polarized in our society and the different tribes. And then you turn on a television station and you can get one point of view here, and you get another one on the other station, and there the two shall meet. So I love the idea of these two great minds, even if it was somewhat fictional, that would come together and willingly walk towards a debate on something as contested as God, which really none of us truly know because we haven't died yet. So it was a really I just thought that was wonderful. And then you cut to 6 years later and things are so much worse, and it just feels even more timely. So and then I think also the time 1939, first day of World War II, I think we can see a lot. I think just we have two wars going on right now. There's a lot of parallels. It doesn't take a genius to see. So I that's what drew it to me. Um,
You know, that's absolutely true. Like there's a timeliness to this film. To see a world split by opinions is fascinating, and I want to come back to that idea. But before we do, Matthew, what is it about C.S. Lewis? Like, what is it that drew you to bring him to life? Because he's such a fascinating character.
I mean, he's one. I mean, obviously, I knew about him from my childhood. I didn't know what he looked like, but I mean, I love the Chronicles of Narnia, and I read that over and over again. I like that. That was my introduction to Tolkien in its own weird and wonderful way. Um, and this as the script came my way solely, I think, because my agent Joel Lubin has started representing Anthony, and actually, I remember him saying, Tony's sort of tiptoeing around this project, and I'm going to send it to you. And I was like, wow. And he goes, don't get excited because it's very unlikely that you'll be involved with it. And I was like, oh, cheers. Well, I'll give it a read. And I really liked it. And um, by the time I actually ended up, just to cut to, because you haven't got a lot of time. By the time I ended up getting it, I was also slightly filled with dread because he's played C.S. Lewis before, and in
Yes.
Shadowlands, and which is one of my favorite performances growing up, and it still is. It still stands up. Like most of Tony's work, it's always going to be brilliant. So it did fill me with a little bit of horror as well. But it is. I am playing him at a different time, and I'm playing him some moments where he's an atheist, and some moments where he's converted, or theist rather than atheist. He's in process. I just find him an endlessly fascinating figure, and I'm bearing in mind that it's not a biopic, so there's a lot to Lewis that you do in your research, and you're like, oh, and this is no offense to MB, I love the screenplay as it is, but it's not heavy on Lewis coming out and talking about his feeling, which actually I feel like is kind of the politeness in him. He gets sledgehammered by Freud literally the moment he stepped into the
Yeah.
house. Um, and I feel like you get to see his Christianity and a lot of his humanity through the way that he listens. Um, that was at least what I was trying to go. You can only convey what you have written down, but you can also convey hopefully a little bit more. The man himself. Um, but anyway, I don't know. I'm already rambling. Yeah,
No,
but
not at all.
he is an extraordinary man, and I think that's what I like about it. He seems very. One thing I found when I was doing my research was that I found this snippet of video of Douglas Gresham, who was Joy Gresham's, the woman he married, the son that he adopted. They actually had two children. But anyway, Douglas, I found him in a farmhouse in Ireland, and the interviewer was like, "What was C.S. Lewis like?" And he said, "I would bust into his room, even though I knew he was working, because I wanted to see him." And Lewis would always he was never annoyed, just put the pen down, even if he's in the middle of a thought, and he would turn and give all of himself to him, give him laughter and what. And you know, it's nice that he made that break of what his own, if he'd done that to his father would have screamed it, bloody murder at him. And you either, with the blueprint that you get as a human being in your childhood, you either follow what you're, I mean, most people follow what their parents give them. But he managed to, through all this horror and stuff that had happened to him and all this trauma, and maybe that was his Christianity. He was an extraordinary, kind, sweet man, complicated, like we all are.
And that comes out in this particular story. I mean, we have these moments where he's coming at it sort of humbly and almost playfully, and then they've got moments where they're thundering away at each other, which is just incredible to see. You know, you see Anthony and yourself just going at it. And for you both, just thinking about this, Matthew Brown, you mentioned about division in society. I'm wondering for you both what you think we gain from unsafe conversations, because this is not an easy one. Of course, the nature of God, as you say, like, how can we know 100% of anything? But you have two people so convinced, and they enter into this with such commitment and humility. It's such an interesting conversation.
I mean, so exactly. I mean, it's what's to be gained by it is everything. I think we if we don't have conversation, you can't evolve as a species, let alone just as a country, as a society, anything. You have to have conversation, and you have to be able to listen. And listen, Matthew is an incredible listener and an incredible performer. But when you listened, but truly though, when we're having these scenes with Hopkins, it's like you can read everything on his face that he's going through, and it's an art to listen, and it's an art as a human to listen as well, and it's incredibly important. And I just feel like it's the loudest voice in the room these days that seems to just prevail. And so I feel like a film like this, a story like this, anything that encourages debate and like listening and learning, and the other side might have something to offer, is only a good thing to me. Because
absolutely, you want to find that, like, if you don't speak, if you don't converse, and it's not just about knowledge, like actual knowledge, or especially when it comes to, it's not just Christianity, there's many different religions around the world, and there's just geographically we can be opposed in ways, and via culture and everything else. And if you've got leaders who are, let's put it nicely, if you've got people who are in charge of countries who aren't particularly intelligent, I mean, we know that debates are important because we have them in America, but these people are coached for months on end. Give them a topic that they don't know is going to give them on the night. Well, that would be interesting to see. Do they actually have the general knowledge? Do they have the experience? Do they, like, we're going to talk on Buddhism this evening. I would wonder if,
well, compassion's an interesting word. Bring that up. Compassion's another thing that just seems to be missing as well. Compassion for your enemy, compassion for it.
Well, respect. It's all about respect. That's the deal. I'm finding the Venn diagram, like the bit in the middle, that we actually. That's what's nice when we have flashbacks in this, where you see that actually they both had a horrible childhood. Really, they both had these very overbearing fathers, and that's a point that they have in common, as opposed to, even though their viewpoints now are so different, it's like they've sort of weaved, that's one of the things I really like about them, is they got far more in common than they don't.
Yeah. And
the minute you see somebody else as human and being like yourself, then you start to respect, wow, okay, when you've got a point of contact and reference, okay, well, I don't necessarily agree, but let's talk it out. Talking is a joy. It's a gift as well. Communication is it's one of the greatest things. It's something that we take for granted ridiculously, and it's something that I guess in some ways these things have become incredibly useful. But I don't know. I'm not sure if we're talking more or less now. Yeah. But I think there's going to come a time now where great oratory is going to become really quite sexy, because I'm seeing people on talking at great length, and like breaking away from non-linear television now, where you can actually have conversations on the internet or on YouTube which last 2 or 3 hours, and I'm like, because I can pause it, I can come back to it. But I love listening to people who have got great intellect. It actually turns me on, so to speak. Yeah,
That's a whole other conversation.
that's a whole other thing. We haven't got the time.
But you know, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, even when you point out your cell phone, like we are communicating more and somehow less at the same time because, but it's conversations like this.
Yeah,
Even if it's we're using technology to speak face to face, but a text message can be read any infinite different ways. It's
yes. Text messages can be anything that's just written down can be misconstrued, because you don't know where someone's putting their emphasis on the words. So, but then that's what happens when it's 100 characters or less, and anything can be misconstrued.
absolutely. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you, just I know we're running out of time, but for you both, this is a film that talks about the power of myth. And you know, I make no predispositions on what either of you believe in. That's totally fine. But I'm just wondering what it is about the power of myth that helps guide us today.
Well, I mean, it's what actually C.S. Lewis was fascinated before, because obviously, he had Christianity sort of given to him as a child, like most people do, and then he broke away from it after his mother died, and then he got into, but he loved myth, he loved mythology, and he loved these Scandinavian stories, or these northernness is what he called it. And I don't know, those sorts of things, they can't be sort of disproved. I mean, Christianity's been going for 2,000 years, and still no one's been able to disprove any of it. In fact, it became part of what became C.S. Lewis's trilemma. And if you look at the Bible and you look at these myths and these parables and everything else, you've only got three options. One is that he was mad, one is that he was bad, and one is that he was God. So, and you try and break it down, you kind of go, well, he doesn't seem like he's a madman in the slightest. So that's struck off. Is he bad? Well, he doesn't seem like he's trying to get money off people to. No, he seems like he's quite a good person. Okay, which leaves you only with the other option of, is he the son of God? Now, that's for other people to. And I think people are still making their minds up. But I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought here. But I don't know. They like these myths. Any kind of great story, any fable, anything. It does leave you to. Is there that kind of thing that he talked about, that joy? Is there something more? And it's a comfort in its own way, because otherwise it's like you get into points of existentialism and you just feel like, does it matter what anybody believes in? Just as long as there's not a hypocrisy about it. You can't believe in over here and then well, yeah, but this is a bit antiquated now, and then so we can still have the death penalty in the country. And you're like, well, I'm just blows my mind because it doesn't make sense, because that's meant to be the word of God. So if he says thou shalt not kill, you can't have the death penalty at the same time. What's going on here? I just need things to mathematically kind of make sense and add up.
Well, it's interesting. The power of myth is, I mean, it's all encompassing. I mean, we wrap up religion in myth. We wrap up, I mean, when you look at Freud's desk, I mean, it's riddled. It's got all these gods on his desk, and he's so fascinated by myth and religion himself. So I think it's just the human experience. We wanna be inspired. We want to understand our place in the world, and stories help us to do that. So, and we're probably all more alike than we realize on a lot of levels. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm all about the power of story. I really love this conversation, and we're out of time. And I really am so grateful for you both for the chance to chat with you.
Let me
And
pose
thank
something
so
to you
much.
though. Like the idea, if you've got a creator, imagine you're the creator, and you've created absolutely all these things, and then you've got bees, and and effectively we're all a subsection of like bees, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have control over. Like, where the hell are the bees going? The bees are going over there. And why the hell are they doing? Come back, bees. So and that would be that's the thing. So when people go, I think what Freud in our film is like, there is the pain of life, but there isn't any reason why there couldn't be someone upstairs going, I know it sucks. There's nothing I can do. It's set in motion.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to rethink the next time I see a bunch of bees, because that's a great point.
You should run.
Gentlemen, thank you so
Talk
much
to
for
you.
your time. I
Thank you
really
very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Have a great
Have a
day.
lovely, well, Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry
Christmas. Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. Have a great
My
day.
pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, sir. Canadian, right?